going on, everybody? It's Wednesday, and you all know how much I love Wednesdays. Your Q&A questions this week are outstanding. I had too many good questions. Again, I try to limit it to 5. This week I have 6 because 2 of them have a lot of similarities, so I combined them into 5 responses. Now, please don't let that stop you from submitting questions. If you have a question that you submitted and it wasn't used this week, ask it again next week. One of the questions that I'm using this week was one that had been submitted the week before, and I didn't quite get a chance to get to it. And so when I saw it again, it went to the top of the list. So I'm certainly not avoiding any questions. It's just a matter of I'm trying to limit it to 5 responses per week. So as always, if you have anything you'd like my opinion on, you'd like my take on, you'd like my 2 cents on, you get what you pay for. And so with that said, I do enjoy these, as you all know, but don't hesitate to ask a question. Now, I feel absolutely awful because I'm way behind right now. I'm way behind on responding to comments. I'm way behind on giving shout outs and sharing some of the gifts that people have sent me. And I genuinely feel terrible about it. I'm going to get caught up. I've had 4 straight crazy weekends, and it's about to be 5. I had a weekend with my dad's birthday and my wife's. That was a busy weekend. Then I went to Strongsville. That was a crazy weekend. Then I went and did a card show with my dad. That was a very full weekend. This last weekend, I was in Colorado Springs. Lucy had a soccer tournament, and we did some really fun stuff in Colorado Springs. Lucy's team did awesome. Lucy's team went 3-0. She had a goal and 4 assists, so she did very, very well. Not losing in their 3 games is obviously something they're very excited about. They've been playing really, really well. But I did some fun adventures while I was in Colorado Springs. I will share more about that in an upcoming video. And then this upcoming weekend, Lucy has an important tournament game on Saturday, and then on Sunday, it's Mother's Day. So again, a busy week. I just, the only reason I'm not trying to make it seem like I have anything different than anyone else. I know everybody's got their thing, everybody's busy and stuff. I just am giving myself an excuse for my tardiness with sharing some of the amazing gifts. In fact, when I got back from Colorado Springs, I had a few things in the mail, and I was just absolutely blown away at how thoughtful and kind they were. So later this week, I'm going to do a video that's going to talk about a couple of things, including a pretty cool announcement, a pretty big announcement coming later this week. In addition to that, I'm going to share an amazing adventure I had in Colorado, something specific that took place there, and some cool memorabilia and things that I saw. And then I will be sharing some of the recent things that had been sent to me through all the generosity of the community. Before I get to the question, the first question, I do want to also say, you guys made me so proud. I was so excited after the video that posted on Friday with Ray from Philly. I had talked about the Baseball Card Hall of Fame. And we went through the existing cards that are in the Hall of Fame, the ballot for this year. I talked about what cards I was picking from the ballot this year. And I said, please show Ray from Philly, show him the Midlife Nation, and show that we are involved. And going into Friday, in the several days before it, there had been about 200 votes. And then in the 48 hours after my video on Friday, there was another 200 votes. So we almost doubled the votes just in the 48 hours from that video. So If you were a person who submitted a ballot, I appreciate it. If you weren't, that's okay. Consider doing it. Go to Friday's video, my conversation with Ray from Philly. There's a link in there, and there's still a little bit of time to vote on the Baseball Card Hall of Fame ballot for this year. Anybody is welcome to participate. So with all that said, let's take a look at this week's first question to me.
If you had to choose between Strongsville and the National next year, which one would you attend and why? If you were focused on getting big vintage cards at good prices. I have never been to either show and also have a 12-year-old son that would like to come along that also loves vintage. Do you think the National for the overall experience? Or do you think attend a laid-back, less crowded, old-school Strongsville? Thoughts?
All right. I really, really like this question a lot. And one of the reasons I like this question a lot is because it's something that I've been thinking a lot about over the last couple of weeks and talking to some of my friends about over the last couple of weeks. Now, the Strongsville show is a very small, intimate show. It's, like 120 tables, something like that. It's not a large show, but the concentration of vintage cards and the concentration of some of the biggest and best vintage card dealers is unbelievable. It's an unbelievable amount of stuff for the size of the facility. Now, so if you're asking the question, you're asking the question for you and your son, it sounds like. Let me first answer the question for me. Now, if it was for me, I would rather go to the Strongsville show. And the reason I would rather go to the Strongsville show is not because of the total volume of vintage cards. The Strongsville show was as much fun as I've had in a long, long time. We all stayed in the same hotel. We all walk across the parking lot of the hotel to the card show facility. We all say, hey, let's go grab some food. And you just grab everyone around the room in your friend group and you go get food. And then you come back and you go back to the show. And then you go into the lobby of the hotel and you hang out with your friends. And then until it's time to go to sleep. And then you do it again. It's like it is an absolute amazing guys' weekend for vintage card collectors. You look around the room and everywhere you look are people that you know, people that you recognize, friends. And so for me, the Strongsville show is without a doubt my top choice. Now, if I had to pick for next year, would I go to the National or would I go to Strongsville? I would go to Strongsville. But part of the reason I would go to Strongsville is not because there's more vintage stuff at Strongsville. It's because the relationships, the time with friends, which is a big part of this, for me at least, a big part of this is the group of people that I've gotten to know and become friends with and shared this hobby with. I get to maximize my time with them. See, at the National, I have a few friends that are getting Airbnbs, and I have a couple of friends that are staying at the same hotel as me. And then I have some friends that are staying at a different hotel than me. And then it's like, well, I wasn't planning on getting a car because I'm staying pretty close to where the National is being held. So how am I going to go and hang out with those other people when they're at different hotels and their own Airbnbs? And it's not going to be anything like Strongsville. But Nationals have just an absolute insane number of dealers and quantity and variety, way more so than Strongsville. So in your situation, you're asking for you and your 12-year-old son, you both like vintage, you want to get good deals, you want to have the most volume possible. I don't think that you can go wrong with the National. I think that's probably where you're going to have the most volume, the most opportunity to get good deals, the most variety, and for your 12-year-old son to see just I just absolute wide-eyed amazement at the situation. Now, I haven't been to a national in quite a while. The national falls every week on my birthday, my brother's birthday, and it's been falling on this big national soccer tournament that Lucy plays in. So I haven't been in a while. I'm going this year because the soccer tournament is a different weekend. So, but to answer your question for you, I would say the national is where I would go with my 12-year-old son. If you're asking for a collector like myself, where are you going to have the most fun? Not necessarily the most variety of cards, not necessarily the best deals, but the most fun, the most camaraderie, the most connections is Strongsville for sure. So moving forward, if I had to pick one, I'm going Strongsville. What would I recommend to the average person who's looking to increase their collection, the size of their collection, the deals for their collection? I don't know how somebody could go wrong going to the National. Now, when it's in Chicago, like it's going to be the next 2 years, the proximity of the hotels to the facility where the actual convention is held is so much closer and so much easier. There will probably be better camaraderie than there's going to be this year in Cleveland. But so that makes it even more of a reason to go to the National. So for me, Strongsville, for most people, to get the most enjoyment from the hobby collecting perspective, I think that it would be the National.
Greg, since you're someone who has a much wider rather than narrow focus, pre-war baseball, vintage baseball, basketball, and football as well, the occasional modern, and non-sports too, my question is, do you have some sort of power rankings, a list of your pros and cons that goes into your buying strategy and decision making for cards moving up or down, as well as taken off of your want list? For example, having a certain amount you would spend for each specific card on your list? Oh, and Greg, don't give in to the background noise. You should have lists, so when you lose one, you still have the other.
Okay, I love this power rankings concept. Now, but first off, I have to say, there are a lot of commenters in the YouTube vintage card sphere, and if there was a YouTube commenter Hall of Fame ballot, you, my friend, are a first ballot Hall of Famer. You are up there with the top of the top. And I appreciate all of the communication that you do, not just with my channel, but with a bunch of them. It really adds to the whole camaraderie for the collecting community. Now, to answer your question, I wish I had a power rankings. I wish I had some sort of formula on why one card moves up and one card moves down. But ultimately, when you're looking at the hobby as a hobby and it's not an investment. Now, again, sure, do I want the cards that I buy to go up in value? I do, not because I want them to go up in value or need them to go up in value, but because if they weren't cards that went up in value, I would say, I wish I would have just waited to buy that one. You want to buy the cards now that you think are going to go up because they're more affordable now than they will be in 5 years if they go up. So you don't go, I want to go out and get a 52 Topps Jackie Robinson just because you think it's going to go up in value and then it's going to make you wealthy. You want to buy it now because you think it's going to go up in value because that means it'll be less affordable in the future. So that's the part of it for me on why value matters when purchasing these cards. So to answer the power ranking thing, I don't really have a list per se. I do have a list. I have a list that has about 70 cards on it right now. And what I did before Strongsville is I went through the list and I just kind of went down the list and I kind of like made a little mark next to the ones that I was like, I'd love to pick that up at Strongsville. Now, obviously, I'd like to pick up any of them. But there were some that I was like, I really want to kind of target them. Because if you have 75 cards you're looking for, it's hard to have any sort of direction when you get to a big show with big volume. So you want to have some idea of some targets, because otherwise I think you just find yourself spinning. So I narrowed it to 10 cards as my first 10 that were going to be my goal. And then if I didn't find a card that matched my price tag, my, qualifications, whatever it is, then I was going to open it up to the other cards. Now, thankfully for me at Strongsville, one of the cards on my top 10 list was the 33 Gowdy Rogers Hornsby fielding card. And I was able to find one that met what I was looking for in a price range and a grade and a quality that I wanted. So I bought that card. And then I kind of broadened after that, and I kind of looked for some other things that are on my list. Now, I haven't answered your question yet, and I get it. I know I haven't. So the way that it works for me is I don't look at that list and say, I have one number 1 and one number 5. And then I go, well, no, this one just moved up to 4 and that one just moved down to 2, or that one moved from 1 to 6 because of this. It's not like the Beckett's back in the day where there's an up arrow and a down arrow on whether it went up or down from the previous month. That's not how I do it. The way I do it is I have certain cards that just, they get me excited when I think about buying it. Like there are some cards that I want, but it doesn't feel as exciting to pick that up. So I'll give you an example. Right now, one of the cards on my list of 75 or so is the 48 Bowman Stan Musial card. And the 48 Bowman Stan Musial card is a beautiful card. I'd love to have one, right? But when I think of some cards and adding some cards to my collection, I'll give you an example of 49 leaf Joe DiMaggio. When I think about those two cards, and they're give or take similar in price range. When I think of, man, I could get a 49 Joe DiMaggio, that gets me more excited right now than getting the 48 Bowman Stan Musial. So that means that the Joe DiMaggio is a little higher on the list than the Stan Musial. That's just an example. I want a T206 Joe Tinker. Now, I want that card. So what I do to rank them is I go, if both cards are in front of me and they're the same, approximate price, would I rather have that DiMaggio or that Tinker? I go, oh man, picking up that DiMaggio, that sounds cooler. I'd rather have that DiMaggio than that Tinker. So the Tinker is now below the DiMaggio. And then I go, what about if the Stan Musial and the Tinker are side by side and say they're the same price? I go, man, I'd rather have that Musial. Having that Musial in my collection would be amazing. So that means the Musial is ranked above it. Now, everything is fluid though. Everything is fluid. It's always changing. And that's the reason I'm not making a list right now of 1 through 75 is because in 2 weeks, it might be different than it is right now. So what I'll do about a week or so before the National is I will go through the whole list and I'll see if there's anything I need to add to the list. And then I kind of go through them and I just go, all right, how about the 49 leaf DiMaggio? Oh yeah, that would be sweet if I came home with that card. Well, that's pretty high on the list then. And then I said, well, the 48 Bowman Musial, yeah, that'd be cool. I mean, I'd be happy if I came home from the National with that. Well, I'm not as excited as I am with the DiMaggio, so I rank it below the DiMaggio. So that's what I plan on doing. That's what I did for Strongsville. I went in with a list of 10. I comped them in a variety of grades from a grade below to a grade above. Just again, not because I'm a grade person, but just because then I have an idea of the range of prices. And so I might say I would be okay of having that, we'll just say the DiMaggio again, the 49 leaf DiMaggio from a 2 to a 5, we'll just say, okay? And I would price them a 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, and 5. I get the last 2 or 3 comps at each grade so that I can get an idea of kind of what they go for. So I know when I'm at the show, I go, oh yeah, that's a little bit overpriced, or that's a really good deal, that's a competitive price, or whatever it is. So genuinely, the way that my rankings work, and whether it's an up arrow or a down arrow, is when I think about it, what does my gut say? What card sounds more exciting to add to the collection? And I literally just kind of compare them. Compare this one to this one, and slowly but surely eliminate them down to the 10 that I'm going to target at the show.
My questions are, what is your collecting strategy? Do you have a limit to how many cards you will own? Do you have a recommendation for the best binder to store and display cards? I asked the last question because most of my cards are still in top loaders and boxes, and I think I want to move them to binders to make it easier for me to view them. I got another question that had a lot of similarities, and I thought there was overlap, so here's that. You have influenced me to want pirate cards. Not for any financial reasons, they're just cool-looking cards. I have a question for you. I'm struggling with my collecting philosophy. If you were building a set and you had a chance to buy a star card or 5 commons for the same price, what would you do? I like stars, but I like getting more than 1 card at a time. Help.
All right. So I thought these were pretty similar, and I had so many good questions. I was trying to look for a way to include more than just 5. And because these were similar, I felt like there would be some overlap. So I thought they would be good ones to use with the same sort of response. So, what is your collecting strategy? What is your collecting philosophy? I'll tell you this, it's not that sophisticated. I don't have like this, mission statement of what my philosophy is. What my philosophy is, if it's something that I think is cool and it's something that I like, I get it. And, there was probably a time where there were cards and I was kind of like, well, I want to get a card that a lot of people like, because that way if I decide I don't want it anymore, it'd be really easy to liquidate it, right? It would be really easy to sell a 58 Topps Willie Mays. I like the 58 Topps Willie Mays. I've had a 58 Topps Willie Mays. And so I was like, well, I like the card. A lot of other people like the card. So I'm going to buy that because I like it. And then if I decide I don't like it anymore, it'd be really easy to liquidate it. So a lot of my strategy or philosophy used to be buy the things that I like a lot that are also kind of mainstream, because then you're not really risking much because it's really easy to sell. Now, if there's something that you like to collect, but it's got a really niche audience, a really, just not a ton of people. Like, for example, Allen and Ginter pirate cards. Not a lot of people are fighting over those things. I used to stay away from that stuff because I'm like, if I wanted to sell this someday, it's going to be hard to get my money back out of it, because there might only be 1 or 2 people that are interested, in how high would they bid up on stuff. Or it's not like I'm going to go to the local card show and put out some, Pirates of the Spanish Main set, and they're just going to fly out of the showcase. They're way harder to liquidate. So I used to stay away from that. Over the last year and a half or 2, I just kind of stopped caring. I just kind of stopped caring about whether they'd be hard to liquidate. And when I stopped caring about that, that's when I started buying more of my golf cards. I've shown some of the golf cards that I bought. I bought a Ben Hogan rookie card. I bought a Bobby Jones rookie card. I've bought a variety of vintage golf cards. And then what I've got in addition to that is some kind of more niche cards, like the pirate cards, like some of the pre-war stuff. Now, there are a lot of people who collect a lot rarer stuff than me. But for me, I could go to most card shows and I could pick up a 1960 Topps Willie Mays. And it's a great card. But because of that, it doesn't excite me as much as maybe it once did. So I'm kind of now just going with my gut and just getting what I like. And will that be financially disastrous? Potentially. But for the most part, what I'm doing right now is I'm not really that concerned about that part. I'm not putting huge amounts of money into cards. I mean, I'm not saying I don't spend some money, but I don't spend huge amounts of money. So I'm not really that worried about it. I'm just trying to collect what I like and sticking to that. Now, there are a couple other smaller questions in there. Now, first, binders. What kind of binders do I like? I'm kind of an old school guy, and I kind of am one of these people who believes they don't make things anymore like they used to. So for me, when I was growing up, the binder was this guy, right? You've probably seen these before. This was the binder that we all had. And I don't even know what brand it is. Distributed Cardboard Gold. I didn't even know that. It's Cardboard Gold does those. Now, I don't even know if Cardboard Gold still makes them. Cardboard Gold makes a lot of like card savers and stuff. Now, I was at a show not that long ago, and there was a dealer that was selling some old of these binders, and I'm like, those are the ones I like. I don't like the ones that you can buy now. So I bought a bunch of them, even though they were old. I bought them because those were the ones that I like. So, I mean, I guess if this is what you like, that's the information, right? See me peeking under there. This is what I like. Does that mean this is what's good? No, not necessarily. It just means that's what I like. So binder-wise, that's my thing. The other question that was embedded in there was, 5 commons or 1 star. I think that depends. Depends on what it is that you're collecting. If we're talking about, pirate cards, now would I rather have 5 lesser-known pirates or 1 Blackbeard? I'd rather have the 1 Blackbeard. If we're talking about, 57 football cards, and would I rather have a Bart Starr or would I rather have 5 commons? I'd rather have the Bart Starr. Would I rather have the, Frank Gifford from the 57 top set or 5 commons? I'd rather have the Frank Gifford. That's just me. That doesn't mean that that's right, but that's just me. So I don't know. I don't know how helpful any of this is. Just giving you my opinion on my. I guess this is my philosophy. I don't even know if it makes any sense what I'm saying, but this is just, again, my stream of consciousness. This is kind of my response when I'm thinking about those questions. I tend to lean towards stars because I've heard of them. I know of them. It's more fun for me to see cards and look through cards of players that I've heard of and I know and I've heard stories about and I've seen highlights of than of 5 guys that, maybe saw a few minutes in a few games and not many people are aware of. Like, that's just not as exciting to me as the guys that I've seen play and perform.
I have a question. Why do you seldom talk about vintage football cards? Are you mostly not interested in those in your personal collection? I have been a vintage football collector for more than 50 years, and I find that they are quite a bit fewer collectors of those than vintage baseball. But I love it way more than baseball. By the way, one of the top 5 greatest sets of any sport, rated number 5 actually, is the 1955 Topps AllAmerican football set, which I have the whole set graded in PSA, including the 2 error cards. A truly beautiful set indeed. My favorite card is the 4 Horsemen, but Jim Thorpe is second. What are your thoughts on that set?
All right. You guys, I've said many, many times how much I love vintage football cards. And I do. And I haven't shown my vintage football cards a lot. Now, I picked up a couple of cool vintage football cards at the Strongsville show, which I've showed. I also showed it on my pickups video over the weekend. Now, again, this is a great opportunity for me to remind you, if you have a card that's your favorite pickup from the month of April, down below in the description, I'll have a link to the Google form to put in your information and upload a picture of your favorite April pickup to be a part of the Midlife Community Show and Tell from April. Now, why don't I talk more about vintage football and I talk more about vintage baseball? Early in my channel, very early in my channel, I talked a lot about vintage basketball, a lot about vintage football, and a lot about vintage baseball. I was kind of evenly spread out. And what happened was, whenever I would do a video on vintage baseball, more people commented and more people watched. Now, does that mean that I should primarily talk about vintage baseball just because more people comment and more people watch? No. If it's a channel of things that I'm interested in, then I should be talking about things that I'm interested in. And I am interested in vintage football. But, as I've said many times, my channel is not a channel about Greg and Greg's collecting. That's not what this is. That from the very beginning, I've made a point of this being a place for like-minded collectors to meet and gather and discuss and debate and share opinions and thoughts and feelings and ask questions and show off their collections. And so if the audience of people who tend to watch this channel are 90% baseball collectors, and then I do a video on basketball, vintage basketball, which again, I like, then I might only be reaching 5% of the people. So if I had, I'm trying to think of an analogy. So here's my analogy. Again, I just make this stuff up on the fly. If I am in Santa Clara, California at Levi Stadium where the 49ers play, and I've got a stadium full of 49er fans, and I've got 5 minutes on the microphone to talk to them about something we all love, I'm probably not going to talk about the San Francisco Giants. Now, are there some people in Levi Stadium that's full that are also San Francisco Giants fans? Of course some of those people are going to be Giants fans. But the overwhelming majority of them are 49er fans. So if I've got 5 minutes on the mic and I'm trying to make the most of my time to make as many people as possible be connected to what I'm saying, I'm probably going to talk about the 49ers. Does that mean that in my 5 minutes I might spend 20 seconds talking about the Giants as well? Yes, of course. I might talk about the 49ers and say, hey, how about the Giants? They're off to a great start this season in the NL West. I don't know. I might do that. But if the majority of the people in the community, because that's what this is, right? Midlife Nation is a community of card collectors. And the majority of them are most interested in baseball. Then I should try to have the most amount of the content be about what most of the people are interested in. Now, I would say for me, if I were to break mine down into percentages, I would say if there's 100% total out there, I'm probably, I would consider myself 60% baseball, vintage baseball collector, 30% vintage football collector, and 10% vintage basketball collector. But the community seems to overwhelmingly be baseball collectors, so that's the primary focus. And I'm getting long-winded. I've already gone for 5 minutes. I just peeked at the clock. So I haven't talked about vintage football in a while. I haven't shown off some vintage football cards in a while. And that's the main reason why. But I have picked some up, and I have shown those But let me show you some of the other stuff that I've got. Let me show you some of my vintage football cards. Let's take a look.
All right, so these are some of my vintage football cards in my collection. How about the 58 Topps Jim Brown? Now, I picked this up a few months ago. It's a PSA 3, and I love it. This is a really hard card to find centered. It's pretty darn decent center, and you can see the back is fairly clean. It's got a little bit of snow in the black section, but man, that checks all the boxes of what I was looking for. I also have the 1965 Philadelphia Jim Brown. This one's in a 6.5. It's a really, really sharp, really clean card. Love this image of him. One of my favorite images of Jim Brown on a card. And so I collect Jim Brown, obviously. And then one of my other favorites is the 61 Topps Jim Brown. This is in a PSA 5.5. I love the dark blue background. I think that this is an outstanding copy of it. And so those are some of my Jim Browns. And then I have Gale Sayers. So I have a full Gale Sayers base run. This is his 66 Philadelphia rookie card. It's in a PSA 5. I feel like it's undergraded. I feel like this is a really, really nice 5. I kind of like the rough cut on the right. I like the character of that. I'm a huge Gale Sayers guy. The guy was a prolific runner. This is a 67, his second year Philadelphia, in a PSA 5. I bought this card ungraded and submitted it myself. Obviously, it's got a little bit of centering issues, but I thought 5 was a pretty harsh grade on it. I kind of was hoping for a 6 on this one. And then the 68 Topps. This is a really nice one. I got this one ungraded as well and submitted it. And thought that 5 was a tough grade again. But that's okay. I got a 5, and a 5 in his first 3. Now this is the 69 Topps. This is my favorite Gale Sayers card. And this one I bought already graded. A really, really nice 6. The border on this chips so easily. Absolutely love this card. And then the 1970 Topps, I got in a 7. It's a great copy of it. I love the centering. I love the color of this particular card. You can see the back there had one of those cartoons that I had talked about recently on the backs of a lot of cards. And then how about the 71 Topps is the next one I've got here. And I submitted this one for grading as well. This I bought ungraded, and it came back a 7, which I thought was a fair grade given the centering on it. But the edges and the corners are fantastic. The color just pops. And then the last of his base cards is the 72. I bought this card ungraded as well, and it came back an 8. I submitted this probably at least a couple years ago at this point. And super excited to have this card in an 8. So that is my run of Gale Sayers cards. So those are the running backs, the 2 main running backs I collect. And then I have some Johnny Unitas cards. At one point, I had all the Johnny Unitas cards. This is my favorite of his cards, the 59 Topps. So this is his 3rd year card. I submitted this one to PSA myself. It was ungraded, and it got a 6. I think it's a fantastic card. And then I've got some Bart Starr cards. I'll show you a couple of those. Here's a 58 Topps. This is his 2nd year card. It received a 5.5, which I think is a low grade given the card. I think it's a really nice 5.5. I love the green in that card. And then I also have his 4th year card, which is the 1960. Now this card is super sharp. Only real issue with it is the top to bottom center. And the side to side is fantastic. Corners and edges are great. The color's great. The back is super clean. I don't know. I think 5 is tough on this one, too. PSA has been grading pretty tough recently, but, the grades are just numbers. And then I also collect Autogram. Now, this is the Autogram rookie card that I bought not all that long ago. It's a relatively newer grade. You can see it's got the serial number starting with an 8. The back is pretty solid. Centering's fantastic. So I was thrilled to get his rookie card in the PSA 3 there. I don't have the 51 yet, but I do have the 52 Bowman. And this one's in a 4. And I think that's a really nice 4. Now, it's got some wax on it, which bothers me zero. I actually kind of think picking up cards with wax on the back is a good way to go because it brings the grade down, but it doesn't bug me at all. So that is a fabulous card. And then I don't have the 54, but I have the 53. This is the 53 Bowman, also in a 4. Centering on it's great on this card as well. And so I am looking for the 51 and the 54. And you can see the back of this 53. He doesn't have a ton of cards because the era he played, part of his career, there weren't really many football cards going on. And then I have the 1955 Topps All-American set. And this one I have in a PSA 6. You can see the color on it's awesome. Super, super sharp. This is pretty similar to what it looked when it came out of the pack. It's an older grade. You can see the back there with the blue. It's got a really cool back on that card. I love this set. This is a fantastic set. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about this set right here.
So that very last card that I showed is from the 1955 All-American football set. It's put out by Topps. It's a gorgeous set. Absolutely gorgeous. And a lot of the old vintage football players that don't have really many cards at all have a card in that set. I think it's a beautiful set. If I were to put together any vintage football set, it would probably be that one. Just because of the variety of names. I think it's cool that they're represented by their colleges and universities. I think that's a really cool addition to that. Some players that only have 1 or 2 cards, one of those 2 cards or one of those 1 cards in some cases come from that set. So I wanted to end with that card specifically because I think you're absolutely right. If you're looking for a place to start with vintage football cards, the 55 Topps All-American set would be a great place to start.
Have you ever gotten a card that was cut large during factory production? I have 2 such cards. Both happen to be 1971 Topps and are too tall to fit in a standard one-touch. One is a Frank Robinson high number and the other is a Yaz. Do the grading companies have a max size requirement that would cause these to be graded as authentic? I also ran into a dealer at the Burbank Card Show in Ontario that had a few 71 Yaz cards that I looked at, and side by side, one of those was also cut too tall. Am I the only one that has encountered this anomaly?
I think that there's an interesting dynamic to this question about, do you ever see cards that are oversized? They're cut too big. And the answer is, well, yes. If you go back to the, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s even, and you take a stack of 200 cards and you stack them together tightly together on your countertop, what you would find is it's not perfectly square. It's jagged because they're all cut slightly differently. Now, we have to remember that the quality control back then is completely inferior to what we have now. If you go buy a box of Topps Chrome cards and you put them together and you stack them, they will be exactly the same. And that's one of the things that's irritating for vintage collectors when they send cards in to get authenticated and graded, where it says minimum size not met. Well, yeah, for exactly the reason you're saying. If the Yastrzemski card that you saw at the Burbank show is oversized, guess what? That's because part of that border was from a different card that was undersized. So now you have the oversized card because another card is now undersized. And then you send that card in just as it came out of the pack, and it comes back as minimum size not met. That's the frustrating part. Now, I understand it would be very difficult for a grading company to know, well, is this just minimum size not met? Or was it trimmed and then made to look like it wasn't trimmed? That makes it very difficult for them. So it would be difficult for a grading company to know, why is it undersized? But to the point you just said, it's because some cards are oversized, overcut, because the blades, by the end of the day, they get dull, or by the end of the shift, they get dull. And what happens is that's why there's all these rough cuts in these cards. And some of them, instead of cutting cleanly, they cut with a little bit of a pull or a little bit of a tear. And so it starts throwing off the rhythm of the machines on the presses. And that is part of the issue with vintage cards. So, when people talk about vintage cards being miscut, when they talk about vintage cards having, a rough cut, when they talk about them being oversized or minimum size not met, it doesn't necessarily mean that some shenanigans went on. It just means that the quality control from these companies that were really gum companies making cards to sell off the gum were not the best at producing the cards at all times. So, yeah, that absolutely happens. Yeah, I've seen cards way over and way undercut. I think that a lot of vintage collectors have, and that's one of the problems with collecting vintage cards is you might have a card that's straight out of the pack and they won't put a numeric grade on it if that's something that matters to you. And some people would say, well, who cares? Who cares if they'll put a numeric grade on it? Because if you know that it's authentic and you know it wasn't messed with, just put it in a one touch and enjoy it in your collection. And they've got a point. They do have a point. But there are some people that, not knowing the history of the card, don't know what to trust. And I get that too. So that is our final question for this week. If you have a question for next week, again, please, down in the comments, all you have to do is simply type out your question. I look forward to it. I'm hoping that you guys have as many great questions next week as you had this week. And don't hesitate to ask your question, to hear my thoughts, my opinion, my 2 cents on it next week.